Tillis. Thank you.
Sorry, JD. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Kiel, it's great to see you from our great state. Real quick question for you has to do with the Section 5307 Urbanized Area Funding Form, grant funds. Can you explain a little bit how those funds have been deployed and what, if anything, we should do in terms of constraints and flexibility that need to be considered by Congress?
I'll do my best. So 5307 funding for GTA is lifeblood. If that was to disappear, our agency would no longer be serving anybody in Greenville, and I'm fairly confident that that would be true for the majority of South Carolina. So we are a small agency with 12 routes, so we qualify under the 100 bus rule, so we use a lot of that funding, up to 75% of it actually for operating assistance. So meaning it is helping pay bus operator salaries and pay for fuel, and another portion is used for preventative maintenance. So, ultimately it is exceptionally important to us. I think, the kind of one of the original purposes of that funding was to be heavily capital focused on buying equipment, replacing equipment, but as to the nature of really the economy for the past several decades, opportunities were there in smaller agencies and smaller systems to use it for operating assistance. And, now that it has been, it is becoming incredibly important to our system.
I think any feedback and to either or Miss India, maybe your feedback specifically on it. I understand that we may be able to, aside from giving certainty on the funding stream, but that there may be some things that we need to rethink with respect to constraints. Anything to add to that?
The flexibility between, thank you for the question, the flexibility between capital and operating is definitely, I'd say, important, if not essential, to Greater Cleveland, particularly in light of that we can't predict the sales tax and how that impacts our budget. For example, 2008, when we had quite volatility within the country, especially in the areas of real estate, the sales tax took a dip. And if we were to be able to get into that situation again, we would be in very dire straits as far as being able to make good on the strategic plan that we have for a lot of our capital projects. And being able to kind of flex that funding back and forth allows us to stay above water and also make good on those technology improvements that lead to the safety of those members that the union has. In Cleveland, I'd say, is about 85% unionized as far as GCRTA is concerned. So we definitely are support.
Mr. Kiel, South Carolina is a pretty red state. To what extent is the legislature being helpful to your priorities in Greenville?
So I've been in South Carolina for 7 years, and I will say there's been a bigger interest in workforce transportation as it relates to public transit probably in the past 6 months than there has been in my time before that. And it really is being driven by industry and manufacturers in our state who have begun asking or demanding more public transit to get their workers to work and be able to use that after hours to be able to move around where they don't have to rely on a car. As at the rate South Carolina's growing, congestion is becoming an issue, and they're aware of them getting to work on time is becoming increasingly important. And that really is what has been driving more conversation as it relates to transit in South Carolina over the past couple of years. Yeah,
and this is just a broader question. I do not want to go over time after I jumped in front of Senator Vance, but I spent a lot, I was Speaker of the House down in North Carolina, spent a lot of time on mass transit in general, including light rail, and was generally supportive. But that was 12 years ago. When I started, and the world's kind of changed a little bit. So how are you all looking ahead with respect to new technologies, with respect to the employment patterns, transportation patterns that changed dramatically during COVID? Some of that's sticky. So what could you tell me about priorities that you may have had 5 years ago that are making you rethink exactly what role transit's going to play in a vastly different futurescape as far as I'm concerned? And we can we'll start with Mr. Kiel and then Miss India and then Mr. McMillan. Also, I want to offer my condolences on the event with the bus driver as well. Sorry to hear about that. But Mr. Kiel, if we could start with you, I want to get a sense that we're really rethinking things and not implementing plans that may be 10 years old in this space.
So we update our plans about every 3 years. So we basically break it down and rethink it about every 3 to 5 years. And what we really see is that we've actually seen an increase in opportunity as it relates to manufacturing jobs. The majority of our customers are not commuters, so we didn't see the dip that some systems saw. And we do look at that. We look at who our workforce is and at the same time who our employers are to make sure that we're having good conversations and good public involvement to make sure that as we're thinking about the future, that we understand what those travel patterns will look like, in addition to changing technologies. We're looking at fare payment type, and at the same time, what is the future of bus transportation as it relates to propulsion look like as well.
Ms. India.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Senator. You're absolutely correct. We have to maintain flexibility in order to be able to be competitive within the market. So some of the things that we're doing at GCRTA include our strategic plan was adopted within the pandemic timeframe, and that's a 10-year plan, but we also have a simultaneous short-range plan. I am, again, a planner by trade, so I'm very well aware that they can belong on the shelf and accumulate dust and nothing ever happens. So in order to make sure that does not occur in Cleveland, we've got a short-term plan over the next 1 to 3 years that basically takes us through task items. And we have what's called a Net Promoter Score, if you're familiar with that through the private industry. It's almost like a Yelp review, how you're perceived by your peers and by your customers. We actually look at that on a quarterly basis, monthly at a tactical level, to find out what the customer experience is like, as well as the operational experience, and we have our goals set by that in order to align with the strategic plan. And that's the plans that include the compressed natural gas instead of diesel, the technology, and so on and so forth, as well as workforce. We also have completed what we call a next gen, and that's a revamp of our system. We've done that through the pandemic as well. We actually took an additional 6 months in order to recalibrate because we have a lot of that reverse commute pattern going on. People are going out into our suburbs for workforce opportunities instead of the urban core. People are also working from home, so we have to be cognizant of that. Our ridership is probably about 65 to 70% on a good day, and that's 65 to 70% of pre-pandemic ridership. So what we've also done is rolled out a couple of microtransit programs, which we're super excited about. That was probably one of the first things I heard 3.5 years ago when I stepped on Cleveland soil. And that was coming from those suburbs, Solon and those others, for example, that are about 30 minutes outside of the urban core. We're actually working with the union partnership to make sure that we operate almost like a private business in the beginning as a pilot program, and it's essentially a match program where those industries that need those workers are actually putting their money where their mouth is. We're matching that to the tune of $600,000 to make sure we can have an 18-month pilot program and get those people to work so they don't have to have that 2.5 or 1.5 hour commute time on top of a 10-hour workday. So those are some of the things we're doing. We also are starting to look at fare capping, which actually gets into the equity part of how to make sure that accessibility is really, truly equitable in Cleveland. Those are just a few things that we're doing to make sure we can stay on top of it.
Thank you all. Mr. McMillan, I'm way over time now, so I defer back to the chair.